I don't think that Eze will happen unless there's confidence in somebody leaving beforehand.
Tactically, I can see the similar problems, but I almost don't care.
He creates chaos, I think. You know, when Eze picks up the ball, people panic because they don't know what he's going to do.
We hold on to our darlings a little bit long, and then when they don't quite make it, we're in some troubles. You know, there's space between the centre-backs and the full-back, but you've got to attack it, and we don't attack that space. Yokarez will.
Naturally, the question that everybody's asking is, well, how many goals is Victor Yokarez going to score? I think people are going a little bit OTT on this.
I think we scored only 5 more goals than Spurs, and they lost 22 league games. So we have some work to do.
Hello and welcome to Inside Gooners, talkSPORT's dedicated show about all things Arsenal. After a break over the summer, it's great to be back and we've got plenty to get stuck into over the next 45 minutes or so. I'm delighted to say that joining me today is Arsenal Vision podcaster Clive Palmer, and making his Gooners debut, it's presenter and huge Arsenal fan, Nick Bright. Good to see you both. Nick, welcome to the show. It's your first one. How have you found the summer so far? Are you glad that the Premier League is just around the corner again?
Mate, I am over the moon that the Premier League is back. I think the break is needed, I'll be honest. Pre-season's been great. We'll talk about that in more detail shortly, I'm sure. It's good to see the boys back out there. But yeah, I'm so ready for competitive football to be back, especially because, we've made quite a few decent signings, I think, over the summer.
And the great Clive Palmer is with us as well. Clive, good to have you alongside us, mate. I've missed your dulcet tones. I mean, I hear them on your podcast, but to be able to speak to you again is an absolute pleasure. How have you enjoyed the summer, or are you two, like us, raring to go again?
Yeah, raring to go. Got the friendlies this week. I can't wait to see them and to see the players on our grass and not watching them slip about in Hong Kong, which is obviously a challenge for us. So, yeah, we've signed a lot of footballers, right? But we're still not happy yet, though, are we? So no doubt that'll come up in discussion.
We're never happy. We're never satisfied. We just want more and more and more. Look, first up, we're going to focus on the most exciting part of the off-season, which is always, of course, the transfer window. Some key signings have already come through the door, including Victor Yokarez, Martin Zubimendi and Noni Madueke. But how much more business will we get done before the deadline? Joining us to answer all the key questions is transfer guru and one of the busiest people in football right now. It's Ben Jacobs. Ben, welcome to the show, mate. How have you found the summer? Everywhere I turn, Ben Jacobs is there giving updates. He's been super busy. It's been great.
It has been busy. Great to be here. I'm growing this beard and it's not going to stop growing until the Benjamin Sesko saga resolves itself. And I think Arsenal fans will be watching that and maybe thinking bullet dodge. Now you've got Victor Yokarez through the door.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the price point that Benjamin Sesko is likely to move at, I've got to say, and I don't know what you guys think about it. I'll come to you, Nick, very quickly. I mean, we were heavily linked with this player. There was a point for me where the price started to get out of hand, and I'm glad we pivoted the way we did. What's your kind of overall feeling on it?
Yeah, just seeing what Newcastle put in last night. What was it? 80 plus 10, I think, euros, million, of course. Something doesn't sit right with me with Benjamin Sesko and what him and his agent are asking for. I think there was talk of, maybe Ben can shed a little bit more light on this than I can, but, because I'm only going by Twitter rumours. But there was talk of a release clause that he wanted in the Arsenal contract. And, we're not a stepping stone club, mate. This is Arsenal Football Club, you know what I mean? We're a big team. And, I just think him and his agent are asking and demanding too much for a player that's relatively unproven, and he was always the one that was seen as a bit more of a development player, whereas Victor Yokarez is coming in ready to hit the ground, score some goals and, do all of that stuff at the Emirates. I can't wait.
I've already been doing that, walking around the house. My wife's looking at me thinking, what on earth are you doing? We'll come back to the striker chat in a bit. We'll circle back to that. But, Ben, we've got to talk about Eberechi Eze because this is a player that a lot of Arsenal fans still have on their wish list, despite the Gunners doing lots of business already. How likely is it, in your opinion, that this is a transfer that gets completed before the end of the window?
Yeah, I think Arsenal have held the talks on the Eze side and they know that he's keen on the move. They view him more as a number 10, and then you have the option to use Eze or Noni Madueke on that left-hand side. But the feeling is outgoings are going to be as important as just bidding to Crystal Palace. And this is where there's a question mark with both extremes possible over Gabriel Martinelli and Leandro Trossard. On the one hand, they've both had outreach to sign a new deal. If the window shuts, you would think that Arsenal will ramp up efforts to tie them down. But with the window open, and even though they've had some positive talks with each player, maybe one of them could depart and it could open up the door. So I think Arsenal have got a big decision to make, because if one of those two leaves, they could pivot for a left-wing specialist. And this is where links throughout the window have come with Rodrigo, but he's expensive, or even Newcastle United's Anthony Gordon, or they go for a number 10, but does that stifle the development and opportunities of Ethan Nwaneri through the centre?
Clive, how keen are you on Eberechi Eze? And I guess the big question around him is, as Ben sort of touched on there, where does he fit in? He's not quite an out-and-out left winger. You feel like he'd be competing maybe with Martin Odegaard if you were to use him in a more central area. So where does he fit into the Arsenal picture for you?
It's not immediately obvious, really. Let's be honest. The way we played last season. There's two sides to this, right? There's the soft factor side. I don't think there's anybody that wouldn't like him on that side of things, because we know his backstory, we know what he does on the pitch, how much joy he brings to the pitch, and his technical ability, which I think is really, really high. Watching the games over in the Far East, I thought some of our technical ability on the ball was quite low. Regardless of the fact it's pre-season, we've got heavy legs, etc. You're looking for more technicians, and there's the football side of things. You know, I know he's not the same player, but we had a similar problem trying to fit Smith Rowe in once Odegaard was in on the other side. He wasn't quite a left winger. He wasn't quite able to sort of usurp Odegaard in that 10 position, and he wasn't quite an 8. And so tactically, I can see the similar problems, but I almost don't care, because he's a much better player. When the ball comes into his feet, everything changes. Pictures change. People trust him when the ball comes in, so they start to move. And for me, a lot of our creativity is down to the fact of our lack of movement. Why don't you have movement? Because you don't have enough technical ability on the ball, and so you stand and you wait for it to come back to you. When players can beat people, you start to flow, you start to move. I want more of those players in the club, and the manager can work out where they stand.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I've been asked this question a lot over the last week. You know, where would he fit into the picture? For me, it's not about shoehorning him into any one given position. It's about bringing a bit more spontaneity to our attack, bringing someone who plays off the cuff, who's bold, who's brave in the final third. And I think we lack that at Arsenal. And I think by default, when you don't have enough of that, you can go into a kind of more of a structure. And I mean, people might disagree with this, but I always think structures are for defending, not for attacking. You want to see a bit more movement and a bit more sort of bravery. I mean, Nick, where do you stand on the Eberechi Eze thing? Would you have him, and where would he fit in for you?
Mate, I mean, I'd have him for so many reasons. Firstly, I grew up a stone's throw away from Selhurst Park, so, you know, it's not really the thing to say on Inside Gooners, but Palace, my second team, I pay a lot of attention to what Crystal Palace do. And I just think, you know, Clive touched on it there, like, he creates chaos, I think. You know, when Eze picks up the ball, people panic because they don't know what he's going to do. He's got a trick in him, you know what I mean? He's got a great shot on him. He can beat a player. He's got a great pass on him. You know, he's got so many attributes that we need at the moment. You know, we've only got to look at the Spurs game in pre-season. Again, I know it's pre-season and a lot of people are getting carried away, you know, because it's Spurs, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, we struggled to create again in the final third. Like in that, think back to the second half. You know, I know they had a goal, but it was a mistake and they scored a goal from the mistake and blah, blah, blah. But in that second half, it was all Arsenal. But again, similar story to a lot of games last season. We just weren't able to create that final bit of magic. Especially, you know, it would have been amazing in the last, 20 minutes Yokarez got? In the last 20 minutes to create something for him, bang, would have been great. But yeah, Eze, I think, does that. You know, bring him into the team. He's done it in the Prem for a team that aren't as good as us, let's be honest. If you put him in that midfield, in that 10 spot, I know Odegaard's got it locked down at the minute, but put him in that 10 spot, I think he creates goals. I really do. Yeah,
I completely agree. And I think, you know, you look at the fact that he's developed as well over the last sort of 12 months or so. He's become a much better box crasher and goal scorer as well. Ben, let's talk to you a little bit about Leandro Trossard, because, you know, you mentioned that there might need to be some outgoings before Arsenal can really accelerate in their attempts to sign Eberechi Eze. Is Leandro Trossard likely to be one of them? Is he eager to leave the club, from your understanding?
I don't think necessarily Trossard or Martinelli are eager to leave the club, and Arsenal have to be careful how they present this, which is why we're going to hear a lot of not for sale. Because like I said before, there's both extremes where if the window shuts, there's a fair chance that Martinelli, Trossard, if still at the club, will continue to speak about extending their contracts and thus protecting their value. But at the right kind of offers, Arsenal will entertain business. Al Nassr already made an inquiry about Gabriel Martinelli. They subsequently have signed Joao Felix, so they're not looking for a left-sided attacker now. But when they asked, the question was Martinelli's not for sale. So people are naturally assuming that it will be Trossard, more likely if one of them is to go, that could depart, especially given his age. But it's a toss-up in the sense that Trossard is valuable as a squad player and willing to stay, and understand that if another left-sided attacker comes in, his minutes may diminish. Whereas with Martinelli, they can get a much bigger fee if they choose to sell, but they still feel like he has that high ceiling and potential to play a very important role. And this is what makes the situation fascinating. So I think it will be a case of if a box office left-sided attacker arrives, whether that's Eze as a 10 or some of the left wingers that I mentioned before, then Martinelli is actually the one you could change your perspective on if the right kind of fee presents itself. The challenge is that Saudi interest for now has gone away. Trossard could also depart, and I think if Arsenal said to him, look, we're bringing in somebody, you're going to get even less minutes, he would accept that and leave amicably. But suggestions, for example, that Fenerbahce are close or engaged with the player are not correct to my understanding. So you've also only got 4 weeks to find him a club as well. I think there'll be Premier League interest in Leandro Trossard too if Arsenal make him available. So it remains possible that Trossard or Martinelli leaves, but actually at the time we're live, there's nothing advanced or imminent with either departing, which again probably explains why Arsenal haven't yet shown their hand in the market.
Ben, what do you know of the situations around Jakub Kiwior and Alexander Zinchenko? They're two squad players, if you like, that have been talked about as potential departures this summer. Is there anything concrete around those two?
Yeah, very concrete. Jakub Kiwior is subject at the moment of active talks with Porto. They're the front runner as it stands. Alexander Zinchenko is drawing interest from several clubs, including Fulham. Actually, I can tell you that Anthony Robinson is subject of an approach from Saudi Arabia too. And naturally, if he goes, Fulham might step up their interest. But that contact that Fulham had with Zinchenko was actually widely reported back in June. So now we're heading into August and there's no development yet. Arsenal told Fulham at the time if they were to sell Zinchenko, they'd want about £15 million. So both of these players are possible in terms of exits. At the moment, I would say Kiwior is more advanced and by all accounts is open to a move to Porto. And then, of course, away from the defence, you have Fabio Vieira as well. West Ham United have considered the Arsenal midfielder. And in addition, you've got Stuttgart at the moment, who are really the club pushing to try and get a deal over the line. So I think we'll see a flurry of Arsenal outgoings now, and that's important to trim the squad size, clear a bit of wage bill space, keep the chemistry balanced. And then maybe in the next week or two, we'll start to see Arsenal go for at least one more big signing.
Clive, if you'd have asked me 6 months ago whether I'd sell Jakub Kiwior this summer, my answer might have been yes. But watching him at the back end of last season, stepping into those big games against Real Madrid, against Paris Saint-Germain, and really sort of growing into the role over time, my view has changed on Jakub Kiwior. Where are you at with the Polish defender? Would you consider offers for him this summer, or do you see him as an integral part of the squad?
So polite Harry might have been yes to sell him. A lot of people were petrified with coming to those big games, and because they remember the mistakes, right? They remember the issue we had against Leroy Sané, against Bayern Munich, and they extrapolate that forward into other games, other areas. So he's a player that just needs rhythm, and once he's in the team, he looks really, really good. He's passing medium, long distance as good as anybody in the team, and he's always fit and ready, you know, despite not playing for many, many weeks. So I have a big appreciation for him, but issues around Kiwior, maybe Martinelli touching what Ben said, is something we have to think about, because at this moment in time, the value is in those two players. They're at a decent level and their value's not crashed. And what we tend to do is we hold on to them until the value disappears. And then we ask ourselves, why can't we sell like Chelsea or Liverpool? Well, this is why. You know, so Liverpool could have held on to Gerald Quansah, for example, but have taken the money on him, took it early, and said, you know what, he needs to go and play. They've probably got a little buyback in there down the road because he's a really good player, just needs to play. But we don't do that. We hold on to our darlings a little bit long, and then when they don't quite make it, we're in some trouble. So sometimes, despite liking the players, from a business perspective, you have to move forward and reinvest that money. And it's painful, right? Because I love Martinelli. You know, the goal that we conceded against Spurs when Trossard was slow getting out, against Newcastle, so when Trossard was slow getting out there, they go down the line and cross it and score. Martinelli plays, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You know, he's out there quicker, he's sharper, and these sort of things we just grown to just sort of accept. So yeah, it's hard, but if we're serious about really winning, we're going to have to make some painful decisions. And with Andrea Berta in the club now, we're going to learn about how he sells. We've seen how he buys and how he approaches that, and Ben gave a great explanation on how he manipulates the market by adding many, many different targets previously. So now let's see how you sell. That's going to be the next judge.
Nick, just very quickly on those guys as well. Like, Clive's got a point, hasn't he? Like, we've got to be able to separate like the fact that we like players from, you know, their value and when it's the right time to sell.
Look, in elite level sport, there is no time for sentimentality. It's really as simple as that. Do you know what I mean? And I think Clive speaks really, really well about it. You know, Martinelli, we all like him as a player because we got him for nothing, pretty much. He was this unearthed gem, which doesn't happen anymore. It's almost like an Arsene Wenger signing, wasn't it? You know, when Wenger used to spot these players playing, you know, in the middle of nowhere and he'd bring them through. Martinelli was that, and he's reached a certain point, but he's not been able to quite go any further. I think Martinelli is if you were to sit here and ask me the question, you know, fantasy now, we can sell Martinelli or we can sell Trossard. I think keep Trossard. I think Trossard's a better finisher, for starters. He only needs like one chance normally, Trossard. He's stone cold most of the time, scores a goal. Martinelli needs a few chances to score, and I usually find, I know there's been occasions where he scored great goals, like against Chelsea, where he ran the length of the pitch. Brilliant celebration as well. We all loved that. But I think from a value perspective, he's worth more. He doesn't offer the same attacking threat as Trossard in front of goal anyway. And I think if we could get a bit of money in the bank, which could go towards the Eze fund, you know, if we're doing a whip round as well, maybe get some money off of you, Harry, the guys on the stream as well, the guys in the gallery, do a bit of a whip round because I'm starting the Eze thing now. We need to get that done. If we get that Eze deal done, I think it changes my outlook and perspective on the coming season.
Sadly, you won't get too much out of me in the round.
I must be getting paid loads for this show.
I wish, mate. I wish. Ben, let me come back to you on some transfer stuff, mate, because another name that we've heard quite a bit over the last few days is Jeremy Jacquet, young defender playing over in France at the moment. What can you tell us about Arsenal's rumoured interest in him?
Yeah, Arsenal are basically investing in the youth market in a number of different positions. You may remember a few weeks ago they tried to hijack Liverpool's deal for Will Wright from Salford, but they failed. The player basically just kept his position that he wanted to go to Liverpool. And then if you look at Jeremy Jacquet, a 19-year-old Rennes defender, and somebody that they actually wanted before they made a pitch for Christian Mosquera. There's a key difference between the two players, because I'm actually told with Mosquera, the feeling within Arsenal is that he's Premier League ready right away. And people are going to be surprised this season at how quickly he integrates and maybe even just how many minutes he gets. Jacquet may be more one for the long term. He's a France under-21 international. And there is a possibility that Arsenal try and revisit this in the final days of the window. But what I can tell you is that Jacquet only signed a new deal at Rennes in May and is contracted until 2029. So the problem is not with the player. He would be keen on joining Arsenal now. It's the fact that Rennes are the roadblock due to the fact that that new deal was only signed in May. And that may mean that Arsenal don't get it over the line this window and have to revisit it in a year's time. But he's a player I'm told that they would take now. They would wait a year to come back for as well. So keep an eye on it, but it won't necessarily be imminent because of the fact the player put pen to paper only a couple of months ago.
Yeah, you mentioned the levels of experience there in comparison to Christian Mosquera. They're worlds apart in that Mosquera played all but one La Liga game for Valencia last season, whereas when I looked into it this morning, Jacquet had played, I think, 12 times for the senior team at Rennes. So there's a big difference there. Ben, thank you so much, as always, for providing your fantastic insight into the transfer dealings. And we'll speak to you again soon.
Look forward to it, guys.
That was the brilliant Ben Jacobs there, just filling us in on what's going on in the transfer window. I want to ask both of you guys this, Clive and Nick. I'll start with you, Clive. We've talked a little bit about some of the elements of this transfer window already. We've touched on some players that have come in, players that we're still looking at. Clive, how would you assess Andrea Berta's sort of dealings so far in terms of bigger picture stuff? Like, he's had to do some renewals, he's had to bring players in. There's no doubt he's working behind the scenes to move some players on as well. What's been your kind of early impressions of the Italian and how he's doing?
Well, the way he operates is quite clear, isn't it? To have many different irons on the fire and then press on the right one. And so far, that's been really, really good, hasn't it? It's worked out well. Every player that we've sort of gone for, we've sort of more or less got. And the key thing is also the renewals. The noises coming out of the club that all renewals are going in the right positive direction. And there are rumours on sales, and I'm thinking to myself, honestly, when do you get some time to sleep? I mean, he had a massive in-tray, which we all knew, and we're thinking, well, we might get 4 or 5 players if we're lucky. It normally turns out to be 4, in my experience. And then, but we thought we might get. We asked for 6, and we got 6. Yeah. Now we want 7. Potentially, if we lose a couple, we might want 8. Right, so and that hasn't happened for a very long time. And you ask yourself, wow, this is a real chance of sort of reinvigorating the message in the squad, you know, with new players, a new coach, a new sporting director, and he has a chance to really lift levels to the whole squad. And I'm here for that. I think there's sometimes you just need to bring new people in with different institutional knowledge that's outside of the club, with new connections, new networks, and that helps the club grow. We're a club that promotes from within, but there is a time to look outside. And I think this was the time to do that, to support the manager in a slightly different way. His new coach he's brought in as well, an experienced man, an older man that brings level of intensity. But for anyone who's met him, says the same thing. He's just as intense as Mikel Arteta. That means if you're just as intense as Mikel Arteta, you must be intense. And so the whole environment is going up, right? So as watching fans, all we want is for them to care as much as we do, right? And they do, and the actions are showing it this summer. And there's a problem though, lads. This is the problem, right? So there are other teams out there, and they are doing their work too. And they are developing an aura around them, particularly Liverpool with their signings. And we are being judged almost in contrast to them. And so we're now looking at our signings and wondering if they're good. We haven't seen them all yet, but are they good enough compared to what Liverpool are doing and what they could do? And so that's the challenge, right? So we just got out of the Man City aura era. We turn around 1 year and Liverpool developing their aura. And what are we doing in the middle, right? So we need to be really strong and competitive. So I do think it's a very interesting first 2 months of the season in particular.
Now, we've all been keeping a close eye on Arsenal's pre-season tour. There's plenty of positives to take, including game time for the 15-year-old Max Dowman. And of course, we had the unveiling of Victor Yokarez. Clive, I know you watch the pre-season games with a really keen tactical eye. Not everybody puts a great deal of stock in them, but I know you're looking for patterns and you're always looking for something to sort of take away. What have you made of the pre-season performances so far? I know a lot of people have focused on some of the negatives, but have you seen anything that suggests that we're going to do stuff a little bit differently this season?
Yeah, we take a mental Polaroid of how we used to play our worst last year and click your eyes on that and then go, okay, what's pre-season look like? So when we're struggling in 100-degree heat after training in the morning, people think, oh, it's just the same. Well, actually, some of the players are the same. So look at what's different. So Zubimendi's obviously had play time. And he's settled in really, really quickly. He plays to our rhythm. And he gets us going in a nice way. And he's always available. And I really like the way he progresses the ball. So that's very promising, particularly when we get into Premier League standard environments. I think he's going to be really, really good for us. And so the first thing you think with him is that people trust his pass. And I think they trust the fact he's two-footed and they're always available. So that creates behaviours of transition behaviours. And in that first game in particular, I noticed when we won the ball, people started to sprint away a little bit more. And so one of the big differences between us and Liverpool is Liverpool's transition ability is like off the charts, right? they commit to their forward runs and they play the ball in front and they go after it. Whereas we have traditions, we tend to have 3 passes to get into defensive shape, then we go. So there's a big difference between us. And I think we miss opportunities to play runners in. And so the runners stop running. Hence we look like we're lacking creativity. So I'd like to see a change in that. And I think that will come in just based on the behaviour, particularly in that Milan game. Our movement was better. But also, I do think Norgard came in, he plays in that 6th role, he likes the ball in front of him. You don't play through him really as a playmaker, but he's a solid player and very good at tackles, interceptions. But apart from that, really, it's about getting minutes in the bank and introducing people to the environment. And the main thing about tours is, for me, a restate of your tactical philosophies with your team, with your players that you spend day and night with them for 2 weeks. You never get that time at any point in the season. So this is a point to reset the culture. And it's very difficult for us as watchers when we see players that are tired and trying to perform, but you can flip to the manager in the press conference afterwards and he looks ecstatic because he's achieved what he wants to achieve, which is a new way of playing, a new messaging going in. And then I think we're going to see a lot more in the next few games about what we're trying to do. So in the meantime, a lot of our attacking shapes are in the signings that we've not really seen, you know. And but a great point by Ben about Mosquera, by the way. He did look really good in that game, you know, and he looked like he belonged on the pitch. So that's an interesting one that I hadn't really thought of. I thought he was a future signing. So you learn things all the time.
Yeah, you do indeed. I mean, Nick, what have you taken away from the pre-season tour? I know Arsenal have still got couple of games to go, but what have you taken away from what you've seen so far?
Do you know, the funny thing is you mentioned those couple of games, and I'm almost going to pay a bit more attention to those games than the games on the tour. And that's simply because we only got Yokarez through the door, you know, for the last game, and he only played 20 minutes, and he's probably not up to speed yet, let's be honest. Gabriel's been injured all the way through. Madueke's not been there. So it's just hard to tell. I think Clive kind of touched on it there. It's hard to tell what next season is going to look like because I don't think the teams that we saw in Singapore and in Hong Kong are going to be the first 11 for Mikel Arteta this season. I don't know about Old Trafford because it depends on fitness, it depends on, you know, who's available and all of that stuff. But like in terms of first 11, I think it's going to be very, very different a month into the season.
My takeaway very, very quickly is Zubimendi is very different in terms of the way he plays the 6 role to what we've had previously. He goes roaming a little bit more, and I think if I was Mikel Arteta, I'd maybe be considering a slight adjustment in the structure of our midfield to just accommodate that a little bit better. Yeah. Clive, let's talk a little bit about Ethan Nwaneri because he's obviously had an opportunity to play in those more central areas. All the noises that we're hearing seem to suggest that that's where Arsenal believe his future is rather than out on that right-hand side where he played at points last season. Do you think he could really break through and sort of establish himself as, I'm not going to say as a starter in Arsenal's best 11 because that's difficult to do at his age especially, but is there a chance that he could really kick on in those more central areas and give us something a little bit different?
Yeah, he said starter there, but maybe as a finisher he can come into certain games. And I think we saw last year, didn't we? We played 58 games last season and it felt like a lot to me, you know? And we could see that some of our players were really struggling in form in certain games and we had to play them through. And I think we have to, I've said this many times, Harry, so you know what I'm going to say, we have to get our minds thinking about starters and finishers now in games of football. And don't be obsessed by starting 11s and think about how you attack a game as a 90 minutes with 15 players potentially, you know? And so that's how we've got to look at it. And I think that would suit Ethan at 18 years of age. We can't expect him to dominate football matches like Odegaard does. When Odegaard comes on, he just takes over the game. So if we're struggling to control the game, he comes deep, receives it, the other team drops back, and he starts to manipulate the team up the pitch. He does that on his own. He's a 25-year-old adult and an international captain. He can do that. So when Ethan doesn't quite do that as an 18-year-old with a much quieter personality, still developing emotionally at the adult level, got all the talent in his feet, we can all see that, but he needs to develop as a young man. So we need to give him time to that. So by feeding minutes into him, just gently, but in game states that suit him, allow him to show his talent, I think would be really, really important. Don't just bring him on when we're 1-0 down and say, have a shot, son. That puts a lot of pressure on him, you know? And so yeah, I think we've done it really well so far. People have not always been happy with that when he's sacked and come back. But if you notice his body's changing, he's growing.
Yeah.
And that only happens because the club recognise where he is in his physical development and they're making sure he develops properly because that will sustain his career over many years. So, interesting. And I think we need to put Odegaard under pressure.
Yeah.
And that's the same for everybody. This isn't a crash at Arsenal. You can't just rock up and take your shirt and play bad and expect to play next week. If we want to win, one of our competitive edges is having a competitive group. And that's what we're going to see this year with the numbers that we brought in. People should feel under pressure for their place. And if they do, they may just keep their form a little bit longer. That cross goes on the button. That shot goes in the top corner. These are the fine details that maybe allowed us to draw 14 games last year. And I cannot get that number out of my mind. 14 games. And just half that. And look how our season would have changed. So we've got to create an edge. And I think the club's trying to do that by lifting the quality of the squad, lifting the depth of the squad and putting people under positional pressure.
Yeah, I think all fantastic points. And I love seeing Nwaneri in those more central areas because you mentioned it there, Clive. He's got quite the shot on him, hasn't he? And you feel like he could find the back of the net on a few occasions. Nick, I've got to ask you about Dauman, young Max Dauman. We've heard this name for a while. We knew that he was this really special talent coming through for quite some time. I feel like we've got to be cautious in the way we discuss him because of his age. But what do you expect next season to look like for him? How much will he feature? Will he feature at all, in your opinion, for the first team? Where does he fit into the picture?
I mean, I agree with you completely, just in terms of we have to be careful. Let's not get carried away. But at the same time, we're going to get a bit carried away, aren't we? Because he is a sensational talent. Just what we've seen, like you said, we've heard the name, and anybody that's followed the academy would already know. But seeing him with playing against big men on the tour and doing what he's doing, unbelievable. How much will he feature? I can't imagine he'll feature much in the Premier League. But look, the cups. I think there'll be opportunities for sure in the Carabao Cup, in the League Cup. I hope so. Anyway, we spoke just briefly before we came down to the studio, Harry. Next season, I hope we can go on a bit more of a cup run in both competitions because it will be nice for players that aren't necessarily Premier League ready players to get more action, more minutes under their belt. So that will benefit Ethan Nwaneri as well, for sure. But Max Dauman, I think he could be the next one. Look, let's be honest, this conveyor belt of talent from Hale End, I look at it and I think if he carries on in this trajectory, he will be the next one in the team. And just on Ethan Nwaneri, actually, sorry, just to go back, what Clive said is just really, really interesting because, yeah, he's a great finisher. I agree. It's almost like in rugby, the replacements, they come on and they finish the game, and that's kind of where Clive's going with it. But will Ethan Nwaneri be happy with that role is my question, just because he's so ambitious and he's looking what his mate's doing in Skelly. Lewis Skelly is in the team. He's on that, team sheet right away. Mikel Arteta, his most trusted left back. So I kind of look at it and I think, is Nwaneri going to be happy being a finisher at the moment? I mean, if it was me, obviously I'd be deliriously happy to be playing for Arsenal, but he's a lot better than I am, and he probably wants to play, and I get that, and I like that as well in a player.
Yeah, I think at some point that will be a question that he'll be asking for sure. What does it look like? I'm sure they've had those conversations during the contract discussions, but I'm sure he'll want to get those opportunities, as you say. Clive, let me get your take on the Max Dauman situation. Again, I'm sure you'll agree, we've all been blown away by how talented he looks, but where does he fit into the picture for the upcoming season for you?
Yeah, we just got to make sure no one else can see him because they might try and sign him. So if I'm Arsenal, I'm saying just go to school, mate. Come back in a year's time until you sign the contract. Those sort of talents are not secrets, I'm afraid. He's too good. You can't hide him. Once you see him live, you go, oh, crikey. Sometimes, Harry, I say, I used to play for this team, I used to play for that team. When I watched Max Dauman play, I realised I never played the game at all because it's all natural. It feels so natural, and his intelligence what stands out to me, and he just seems to be ahead of the play. He's not the most. He's quite physical, but yet he looks the quickest on the pitch. And that's down to how he moves people around, or puts them off balance and creates hesitation and then goes again. How he presents the ball to them and takes it away. He's just very, very clever. He uses everything he's got. He's very hard to miss, and we have got one of the best talents you'll see at this age, maybe the very best. So we have to be careful with him, don't we? And that's my natural, my natural gait, so just to be careful. And but at the high level of sport that we're in and the elite level that we're at, I promise you, if that player can help us win, he will play, because that's what underpins football. If he can help us win, he will play. So we have a development responsibility, but we also have a sporting responsibility. So a responsibility to him and his talent. So we have to look after him, and it sounds like we've got good people around him, etc. And the club is no secret to the club, obviously. So yeah, it's going to be one to watch. But sit back, try to stay calm, but it's very difficult.
I'm not very calm, I'll be honest. I am on the hype train for Max Dowman, and yeah, we've got to try and temper expectations, but I'm excited. I think he, could be. I'm not going to say the next Bukayo Saka. I don't mean that he's going to replace Bukayo Saka, but a generational talent, and we've got him again. I just don't know how we keep doing it, honestly.
And you take confidence, don't you, from the fact that Arsenal have brought top talents through before. They know what they're doing. They know how to handle these types of situations. Now, with just a few weeks to go, not even that now, until the huge opening game against Manchester United, we need to have our first assessment of how we think the mighty Arsenal will get on this season in what will hopefully be a campaign to remember. Clive, the main story of the window was the signing of Victor Yokarez, a prolific number 9, exactly the type of player that Arsenal have been missing for quite some time. How much of an impact do you think he and the fact that he's a natural number 9 will have on Arsenal moving into the new campaign?
Yeah, he's a real number 9, somebody who wants to score and only thinks about scoring. His movement and desire to get into those areas to get a shot just stand out in our squad, because we are quite collective in our style, and we create combinations and different units, and we knock the ball about, almost like a team of midfielders, aren't we? Even our defenders could play in midfield, all of them, right? So, but then we've got this one bloke in Victor Yokarez who actually just not a midfielder. I'm a centre forward, and can you give me the ball here on my right foot, please? And if you don't, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to tell you to put it on my right foot. And I think in our squad, in our club, there's room for that player. And I was the guy that sort of wanted Sesko originally, but I think he's too similar to Kai in many ways, the way he faces up the game, wants to combine with height, etc. And with Kai's extra muscles now, do we need another muscle-bound centre forward at 6'4", 6'5"? We probably don't. With Yokarez offers that diagonal movement, that running in behind. The lateral movement is what really interests me. When we go out to the right wing and Saka gets 14 people come over there, there's space in behind that run. There's space between the centre-backs and the full-back. But you've got to attack it. And we don't attack that space. But Yokarez will. And so maybe they won't send that many people over to Saka because they know he's going to run into the space. So it changes how we attack. This is why I'm holding my sort of analysis back until I see him at the Emirates this week, because we haven't seen the attack yet.
No.
We just haven't. We've seen the continuation of last year. So yeah, I'm really interested in what he does. I did go to Sporting when we played them, and I saw his presence and I felt his presence, and we were tip-top that day, 5-1.
Yeah.
But he never stopped trying. And he was desperate to make an impression against us. And that stuck with me as I walked out the ground. And I think Arsenal have chosen him because of that mentality and what he brings to us psychologically as a group. And I think we need it. And I think, sometimes you end up with what you need and what you should have. And we need this player more than we need a Sesko. Sesko probably, it's not this show, but probably suits a Newcastle more for his play style, And you can see that happening, couldn't you? You can see it. And so, yeah, I think we've got the right guy. Let's see what he does.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point about how he'll kind of supplement the rest of the attack, the spaces that he'll create for those guys, the fact that he'll occupy centre-halves a lot more than a sort of false 9 would, and that will make room, in theory, for other people. Naturally, the question that everybody's asking is, well, how many goals is Victor Yokarez going to score? I think people are going a little bit OTT on this. For me, if he gets 15 league goals and adds 6 or 7 and makes it sort of 20 plus in all competitions, I think that could be enough to make a real material difference to Arsenal's season. I'll get you guys' predictions on how many you think he'll get. I mean, Nick, Premier League goals, what are you expecting from this guy? He's got an incredible record in Portugal, but the question is, how does that translate into the Premier League football?
Yeah, with all the low blocks that we have in the Premier League, especially against us. We saw it's a recurring nightmare I have every night thinking about the low blocks. But to put a number on it is so difficult, because the number that you plucked out there, 15, well, in between 15 and 20, and then some goals in the Champions League and the Cups, that's a great season. Because if you think back to last season, Clive mentioned the amount of draws that we had. If we just scored a couple more goals here and there, because we get goals from all over the pitch as well. Our defence gets goals, our midfield gets goals. And now if we can, get some goals through Victor Yokarez, if I know you can't go back, but if we had a time machine and we could go back and have Yokarez in the team last season, it could all be very different if he just got 15 goals. So I think 15's a good number, but look, everybody wants to see us over that 20 number, right, with our number 9, because the last person to do it was Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, wears the same shirt number as that man did. And as an even greater man once did in Thierry Henry, if he could match those numbers. I mean, now I'm living in dreamland now. But between 20 and 25, I would be happy with that, I'll be honest.
Clive, I've got to get a number from you. I'm not going to let you get away with it. And I also want to ask you what you think of the significance of that shirt number as well. Does that help him? Does that spur him on, or could it weigh heavy?
I never give you numbers out. I think I do think the 25 number is the amount of goals we need to score as a team, more than we did last year. I think we dropped 22 goals from the season before last season, and that's not good enough. I think we scored only 5 more goals than Spurs, and they lost 22 league games. So we have some work to do, right? So I want to see the team get 25 goals plus what we got on last year. And if Victor Yokarez helps on that and gets 40, I'm with you, Harry, around 15. Maybe I'm being nice because I don't want him to be seen as a failure. I want him to do well. 15 goals for Arsenal onto his group would be really good. And I think allow other players, let's be honest, we lost Havertz and Saka to operations, not just injuries, operations. Right? So that's significant time out of the group. If they're in the group, we're not scoring that number of goals, we're scoring a lot more.
Yeah.
And so we need to get to what we did before, the 91 goals, around that number, to beat Liverpool. As I said earlier, they're developing something that's making the league think already, and so we need to make sure that we're close to them, particularly after the first 6 games. Because if we are, I think we can do something we didn't do last year, is put them under pressure, and I think that's what we haven't done. We haven't pressurised Liverpool enough for long enough to see their failings and their issues. So yeah, I want to see that 25 goals go in, and then from there on, see what we do thereafter. And Yokarez, I think, will share the games with Havertz. And that's the truth, right? There's too many games. Every 3 days, he won't play every single game. But share the games with Havertz and see who does well enough, and they're going to the first 11. Simple as that. That's football.
Yeah. I think there's a world in which as well you'll see them play together at times. I think if we're chasing a goal, I could see him sacrificing one of the midfielders and using Kai Havertz as the kind of go-between and getting him up close to
4-4-2 almost. Is that what you're saying?
Could happen.
Wow. Could never happen. Surely not in this day and age. No, come on.
Nick, I've got to ask you about the tricky start to the season that Arsenal have, right? We've got some really daunting games. Man United away, I don't care what anybody says about where they were last season. Going to Old Trafford is never easy. Leeds will be excited having been promoted. Yep. Liverpool's coming up very early on in the season as well. Newcastle City as well. Do you think Arsenal will benefit from that? Do you think it gives them greater focus going into the season? Or do you think actually you don't really want these games when you're still not quite up to speed and at 100% and still ironing some things out with new players? Yeah,
see, I don't want to be glass half empty, but I do think having tough games at the start is not necessarily what you want. The engine's not up to speed yet, and it's difficult to get that engine up to speed in pre-season because not everybody is giving it 100% in pre-season, and I'm not saying the players aren't trying. That's not what I mean. But you know what I mean. In pre-season, there's not really anything at stake. Everybody knows that. Whereas in the Premier League, especially at the minute, in the Premier League, if you lose or draw a game, it feels terminal in this day and age of Manchester City and Liverpool. So going up against Manchester United in the first game of the season, I feel like that could be tricky. They're going to be right up for it. They've played quite well, actually, Manchester United in pre-season, annoyingly. So yeah, if you were to ask me if I would swap the start of our campaign with somebody else, yeah, I'll definitely swap. But at the same time, look, if we come out the traps quickly and we do very well in the start of the season, I'm not going to put a points tally on it, but if we do very well at the start of the season, that's those tough games out the way. And then you've got an opportunity then to, just go about your business. Yeah. Silently, go about your business, picking up 3 points week in, week out. And then look, those other teams, Liverpool and Manchester City, they're going to have to go for a sticky patch at some point, a difficult run. And, hopefully they'll come out the back of their difficult run worse off than us.
Yeah, I'll answer that question at the end of that run of games as to whether it was a good thing or not. Clive, for you, what's the kind of minimum expectation around Arsenal this season? Whenever I've spoken to non-Arsenal fans, the first thing they say is, well, surely he's got to win the league this year, Mikel Arteta, right? Otherwise, it's time to start looking elsewhere. I don't quite see it like that. I don't think it should be that binary. But what's, in your mind, the minimum expectations going into the new season?
I expect us to really go for the league, really, really hard. I don't think anyone can guarantee it, but you listen to every single interview coming out of the club, talk to the players, what they want to do. We want to win trophies. We want to win trophies. I think that's just the next thing we have to do. There's no debate. Don't shy away from it. We shouldn't shy away from wanting to win and trying to win, because that's what the players want. It's about how you go about expressing that, I suppose, in the online world, and how you want to hold people accountable for not winning a game or even a pre-season game. And so I do think we the level of calm when it comes to these issues, because we need to create an environment where the players can win. There's enough people external to Arsenal trying to stop us. Maybe we shouldn't be trying to stop us from the inside, and that's how I feel. That's how I go about things. But we shouldn't be afraid of trying to win and wanting to win and saying we want to win. We need to analyse, when we did have our peak period, why we were winning, right? And a lot of those games, we scored early in those games. Yeah. We controlled the game states, and I think that's a really key point. Once we score early, we blow teams apart, 4s and 5s, and suddenly the goal tally goes up. I think there were too many times we spent too much time at 1-0. An event happened, he said, 6 red cards later. Yeah. An event happened, and suddenly we're hanging on for a draw or we lose a game. And we think, well, how's that happen? Because we lacked firepower. We lacked the ability to control the game state. So I want to see, first 15 minutes, I'll be looking at that a lot this season. I want to tear into teams.
Yeah. Guys, we're really short of time, but I've got to get a line out of you really quickly on the Arsenal third kit that came out earlier this week. Loads of people love it. I'm not so sure about it. So I want a quick fire rating out of 10 from each of you on the new kit. I'm going to give it a 5.
5?
5.
Oh, mate, that is criminal from you. I'm quick fire. I'm going to give it a 9.5. I think it's beautiful. Almost as good as the black one from a couple of seasons back.
Clive?
Yeah, it's a beautiful kit, 9 out of 10, but I look better in black than white, so that's why it's not a 10. So there you go.
I love the detail on it. I'm not sure I can get on board with Arsenal having a predominantly white shirt, though. That's where I'm at on it. I get it. It reminds me of someone else, and I don't want to be thinking about someone else. That's all we've got time for, guys, on today's Inside Gooners. Thanks for your company, and a massive thanks to the brilliant Clive Palmer, the fantastic Nick Bright, and of course, the brilliant Ben Jacobs. We'll see you all on the next episode. Until then, take care.